LA Convention Center on the west coast of America. Live from E3, it's the GameSpy LiveWire.
GameSpy LiveWire, and it's 11 o'clock on the west coast. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. How's your headsets there? Is it okay?
Yeah, great.
Nice and good?
Yeah. I like
Will's
with
us. Will Wright is with us, ladies and gentlemen. Will Wright, the guy who brought you everything Sim. I mean, how far back does the Sim series go?
Well, I first started working on the original SimCity actually in 1985, but
Yeah.
we didn't publish it until 1989. It was originally on the Commodore 64, and you probably wouldn't recognize it.
Well, I recognize it because I played it then. You're looking at somebody who's 44 years old.
Well, what most people thought of as the original SimCity, in fact, was the second generation. The
Yeah.
Commodore version was actually far more primitive than the original Mac version.
Sure. Well, being a Mac user for a long, long time, I'm like in such a minority here now.
I used to be a total Mac zealot myself, and
Right.
it was a sad day when I had to kind of put away my Mac and get a Windows machine.
Have you looked at the new Mac OS 10? And
Yeah, my wife has one,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of jealous of her that she's able to use it.
So here at the show, you're showing Sims 2, and there's an expansion pack.
For SimCity.
For SimCity.
And we have a new version of the Sims console game. Plus, we also are developing a Game Boy Advanced version of the Sims.
Perfect. Obviously, you've gotten some amazing press over the last year on Sims Online. I'm wondering how you feel about the performance of Sims Online.
I think the expectations for the Sims Online were probably set way too high, relative, because the PC version ended up selling just huge quantities.
Plus, you got a ton of coverage too. Everybody was saying, are we never going to go outside anymore? Are we all going to get our entertainment?
Right. It was kind of this, combination of the online game hype and the Sims hype, together made this, cresting wave. But, right now we have about 100,000 players, and we're running it at a profit. And, that type of game is the type of the game you have to take a long-term view of. And we're going to be running that game for at least 5 years or more.
Sure.
Whereas most games you think of like, a year or two out. And so we really have to take the long-term view with TSO. And right now we're, doing a lot of things, putting new stuff in every week and figuring out what the players really want. And then we're going to focus on getting more players back into the game once we really get it tuned nicely.
I had a caller on Online Tonight about 2 months ago who called me up to say he has to break up with his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, because she is jealous of his online girlfriend. His online girlfriend.
Some really unusual stuff has been going on in there. We've had several real marriages result from the game,
Right.
and the intensity of some of the relationships and the communities that people are building in the game are fascinating. So we're studying this right now and learning a lot from it.
Does it scare you at all, the realities that people move into when they use your games?
That surprised me a lot, just kind of studying how many people get deeply invested in their avatar in an online game. Even in the offline Sims, it's amazing how much people will invest in their little kind of imaginary world there. Of course, everything in moderation, but it's fascinating to study those people and kind of how they view this little world.
We're talking with Will Wright, who has created Sims and the whole series. Any part of the series your favorite? I mean, obviously the current stuff, but anything you look back on and go, yeah, I really like that. I really like playing it or like creating it.
Oh, I always look back on SimAnt with fond remembrances. Most people don't realize, but the behavioral model for the Sims, in fact, kind of evolved out of the SimAnt model.
Right.
I was looking at how we got the ants to behave in a fairly robust manner, and I was thinking, wow, I wonder if I could make humans, work with the same type of simulation. So in some sense, the people in the Sims are really the result of the early work in SimAnt.
I see.
I'm also very happy with what happened with the Sims community. All the stuff that people did on the web and with storytelling and whatnot. I think that was just incredibly interesting to me. Usually when you release them, you're totally sick of it. You wait forever to release it. When I released this, the fans started doing this cool stuff. So all of a sudden the fans were entertaining, for years afterwards. Which is kind of I like the best.
All right. And how far can you take? Obviously, you branch out areas that people never expected. I don't think anybody expected Ant when it came out. I mean, when you made the announcement about it. Mm-hmm. So where do you see it going? I mean, is there a mission you really want to do?
Yeah, it's working on stuff now. We've established Sims major franchise and SimCity franchise. And took his we never the dice, and you hope to have experience to increase your probabilities when you roll dice.
Sure.
But I definitely want to branch out something that's completely not the Sims or City. And I think the good property shares something in the real world, something where the players can be very creative and expressive. Those are the type of games that attract me.
We're going to be taking questions in the chat room in just a moment, so line them up. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Will Wright. Will is the creator of the Sim series, and again, you're showing at the show What's the expansion pack for Sims?
Well, actually, what we're showing on the show floor is Sims console version. It's a new version for the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube.
Right.
It's called Busting Out, and it's a standalone game. It's not an expansion, but it's
But
an
you said you had
evolution.
an expansion.
Oh, we had an expansion for SimCity.
For SimCity, yeah.
Yeah, which is a transportation expansion pack, and so you can actually take control of the vehicles and do missions, fly the helicopter, drive the police car. Plus, we have new things like ferries and new types of transportation maps and simulation. So
How
it's
many
kind of a
people
whole new
work on
direction.
these games? How many people work on it?
It varies a lot. Our typical team around the time that we ship the game will end up being around 40 to 50 people. Something like The Sims Online was more like 100. But every year they get larger.
Yeah. In terms of the mainstream of America, they have come to know your whole line either through sort of like light interaction or hardcore gamers.
Yeah.
And there are people games and no other.
Mhm.
There are also people who know you only through Sims Online and don't know sort of the backstory and the standalone games. When you go down the street now, I imagine people recognize you and know who you are. I mean,
Well-
you've got cameras like crazy following you around here at the show. It's kind of a different thing. Are you handling that well?
The worst thing about that is the guilt trip, because
guilt trip?
The guilt trip, because most people look at me and say, "Oh, you created this great game, or you made this and you made that," but in fact, it was like 40 people making this game.
Right.
And I mean, if they were to come to the office and watch me, they would see that I'm just like one person. I'm more like a traffic cop on these games, kind of telling who should talk to who, what ideas get through the filter, which ones don't. And so really, it is a team effort. And I know you hear this before, but then people come up to you, to me and say, "Oh, you created this great game," and I get all the credit for it somehow, even though it was like 40 people working on it with me.
And that kind of says that over time, your role has changed from somebody who's working late at night, working with the actual pixels themselves, working on the strategy, to somebody who is much more of a project manager. Do you miss getting into the muck and the mire of actually creating the game yourself?
Well, I still get very involved in the design of the games I'm working on, and that's where I really center. I'm not so much in management as I am in running the design vision and making sure everybody's on board and kind of collating the creative input.
Mm-hmm.
But the first game I did, I did all the programming, I did all the graphics, I wrote the music, I wrote the manual.
Right.
And so that's the way games used to be.
Sure.
Very much kind of a lone wolf thing, and just going through the 20 years, I'm kind of afraid to admit that I've been doing games. It's evolved into a wholly different enterprise.
Sure. Do you find yourself when you look back on the time that you spent on the games themselves, do you make these decisions the same way you did then? I mean, then you were the sole proprietor. You made the decisions. If you liked it, it got into the game. Are you like the ultimate authority when you decide what's going to go into the next Sims games?
Well, what typically happens is that we get a lot of members of the team giving creative input and feedback, and if we talk about something long enough, usually there's some consensus that we reach. Every now and then, I'll be like pulling it off in a weird direction, and people will rein me back in, and that's very good. So I would say it tends to be much more collaborative, but at some point you'll get these kind of design issues where there's there are two camps that each want something different, and somebody has to go in and play kind of the bad cop and say, okay, it's going to be this way, or the dictator.
Right. And you don't mind that?
No, I mean, I accept that as part of the job.
All right. Let's pop over to the chat room. I'm sure we have tons of questions.
We do. Frag Reaver is wondering if any of the new Sims games are heading to the Xbox. We've seen Sims kind of break into the console arena. Are you planning to head to the Xbox anytime soon?
Well, we have Sims on the Xbox right now. We released around Christmas, and the one that we're showing on the show floor, Busting Out, the next version with the more expansive world, is on the Xbox also.
Gotcha. S162 is kind of curious, and a lot of people are asking about a Sims 2 at some point.
Well, that's actually what we're showing above our booth is The Sims 2 right now. We're unveiling it here at E3 for the first time, and it's a complete rewrite of the game, completely new graphics engine. It's full 3D, much closer in on the characters. We have facial expressions. We follow their entire life cycle from kid to elderly. If they
it seems like you're growing your characters, what with the DNA structure and all that sort of thing. You're growing your characters from the inside out to make them more realistic. We've seen some games where the eyes are so realistic that it's kind of spooky to look on your screen. Are you also looking at the outside, sort of the fascia of your characters as well?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, if you look at a lot of games here, they can put extremely, believable-looking humans on the screen, and they all, behave as dumb as rats, And so that's, the real issue isn't so much how they look; it's how they behave. How elaborate are their behaviors. So, and that's where I think, our real advantage is, and what we really want to focus on with The Sims 2 is giving the Sims more awareness of the environment around them. It used to be that it took a fire in their house to get their attention.
Right.
Now, sucking in the room, they'll turn their head, they'll smile if the person. We're getting a more subtle awareness for the Sims on The Sims 2.
All right, back to the
Skittle is wondering how far you guys go with the Sims expansion add-ons and such. How are you going to take it, and when they're going to be a kind of cut-off as before you moving on?
Well, we have the Sims, which released 3 years ago, and at the time it was kind of moderate level platform requirements. Nowadays it's very low end platform requirements. It's a very, very large audience of casual players. And the expansion has been selling in the market. And released the Sims 2, which is a higher level minimum, can require a 3D card instance. And the players that have higher end spec move over to Sims 2, but we support the low end one because every year younger players are getting hand-me-down computers and playing the Sims on it. So I'd say the players keep buying them. We'll probably keep making expansion packs, but at some point we'll cut that off, start moving all the development back to the 2.
At what point did you make the decision, hey, to get any more out of this, we really have to start looking at late model machines and better graphics packages, and how was that decision received in your team?
Well, I think we always knew that the next version of the Sims had to be fully 3D, and that we wanted to get in close enough to see the characters' facial expressions. I think those two kind of points drove the rest of the hardware requirements. Okay, if it's going to be 3D world, we want to do a lot of nice effects, particle systems. We want to have very smooth animations. The animations are much higher data rates than the old ones. There are a lot of technical issues here. But I think it pretty clearly told us that the next level, of the Sims is going to be at least a 2 or 3 increase in CPU performance. And that kind of said that, okay, well, we're talking about, maybe 3 years, before it's really feasible to release that and have our typical mass market audience be able to buy and run that game. So right now, you cannot buy a machine that will not run The Sims 2. And that's kind of the way we're looking at it, is that any machine you buy right now will be able to Sims 2 fine when it comes out next year.
Okay, cool. Back to the
Had wondering if you're interested in any other types of games, not just simulations.
Oh, as a player, I play games all the time. And actually, I'm at time war games to play all these, these board, the board war game, and then the computer version of those.
Right.
And
not Tigos, but the actual long,
like Panzer with the
exactly.
page roulette, etc.
Yeah.
But there are a couple other that I really enjoy. Gran Turismo 4, I play a lot. I play race before I was in the computer. And
what did you?
Rally, actually, American Rally.
Wow. You wanted to get it right on time, rather than game.
No, it's actually as fast as possible. You're thinking of TSD Rally, which is on time. It's like, gravel roads, night type of thing.
Now, it's interesting, you went like this with the controller rather than driving, which you didn't realize what you're talking about, right? Yeah. So, but when you said you were doing
I haven't done it. I used to. No, I do.
Yeah, you can't. Although they're videotaping this, the thing is when he described he used to race in real life, rather than flipping the steering wheel at 2, he actually had the controller and worked with it. It's a natural reflex. All right. So back to the chat.
We had a really interesting, actually. Ever thought of a modding community to take a crack at games? I know a lot of variated stuff before the Sims, but have you thought of really expanding what they can do with it?
Yeah, we've been struggling with it a little bit because let the users customize the Sims up to schools. They can create new characters, new looks of objects, stories, etc. We haven't actually given them access to our pro tools for the objects. We were thinking about it, we really wanted to, but then we were looking at the people that were downloading these games, and these objects contain code. Just one line of bad code ruined their installation. And these casual people would stop downloading games. Stop downloading the objects. And so we were very careful, very worried about the fact that it just take a few corrupt objects to cut off the behavior that was great for the community. Sure. So our challenge there is us developing ways to where people players can insulate themselves, say, okay, I want to download this whole mod, larger granule of expansion, or give them a more foolproof programming where they cannot crash the system. And those are kind of things we're struggling with. But I'd very much like direction as long as we didn't kind of taint the huge download community that we currently have with consumers.
Is there any way to sandbox so that you can let people do it on a safe level rather than on a wide open level?
Well, that's kind of the way we do it in testing. I call them sandboxes. They have these little toys that we can do automated testing, and if it breaks it, we can identify and quarantine that object.
Sure.
We need some system, and we don't want to get the business of proving them, where they sit out to test them, prove them.
Sure.
I'd rather give the players a way to do that, a web way to test these objects, and then put their approved objects up there.
Gotcha.
But it's kind of messy work because you're
always let the users do the work you don't want to do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Always. The gamers will do it.
But when you get into the idea of giving somebody a very open-ended programming system that's foolproof, that's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. Back to the chat room.
We had one question from somebody about voice chat. They're wondering if The Sims 2 or if any of the other, I guess The Sims Online would be appropriate for that, if there's ever going to be enabled voice chat with the online.
Well, the console would be interesting.
Yeah.
Perhaps one day we would experiment it first. As a player of The Sims Online, I'm not sure on it right now. I think certain players might, but I guess I think 70% or more of our players in Online would not. The one thing that voice chatting is it allows for not great typists to be expressive in these worlds. Right now, that's one of the largest filters. Somebody coming in and really active, engaged, socially in there is the fact that they very well. But on the other hand, games are probably going to teach typing skills like Messenger more effectively than anything else.
Any ability of doing a pure sort of ASP version of any game so that no matter what people were on, they don't even have to go and buy an pack at the store. They can just simply log into the website and play the game without any sort of background for a subscription.
Probably we're looking like that actually. Yeah. A lot of that depends on the business model behind it. A lot of it kind of corporate decisions at the large corporate level.
Yeah.
We're doing things in the design right now of the game version that are giving us kind of a first pass at what that might look like. What would it feel playing this game on a portable wireless platform, for instance?
Sure. Chat room?
Zert would like to know, do you think you might visit some of your other titles? You mentioned SimAnt earlier.
Oh yeah. Well, there's actually a kind of working on in the background that a lot of similarity to one of my titles, but I can't really talk about it right now. Those titles I've done represent, interests that I have. And usually my games come from that I'm strongly interested in.
Sit down, Dave. Come on.
Dave Fargo has
Fargo's
been
like
kind of
him back. Sit down and talk.
This is the man with the curtain here.
I did not add an extra microphone. Pleased to meet you. I'm Fargo Kozak from Game. I have finished the last question. I'd be poking around.
Here's ring. And rather than turning his mic off, I'm like, come on, Dave, get involved. No problem.
Great. I had a question about Sims 2. So one of the things that I really appreciated about it is, in Sims 2 now you can, you're born, you grow old, and your character ages and dies eventually. That's a pretty big shift. So how does that change gameplay? What do you think about that?
Well, it allows us to go into a much more strategic type of gameplay because the things that happen to them as kids, they carry on into adulthood. The experiences they have in life, but also they inherit traits from their parents, not just appearance, but also behavior. And so if the parents are particularly, nice or mean or rambunctious or whatever, their kids will tend to be, And so it's kind of like, the parents.
And see, that kind of is a departure sometimes from some behavior where kids will say, well, I'm never going to treat my children like that, even though sometimes they can't help it. Sometimes there is that complete divergence, and I'm wondering if there's any sort of randomness to that, because I know, I grew up in a household that was broken over and over and over again, and I just don't want to be that when I have kids.
But I don't think we're going to see Sims, in Bosnia.
It seems like you really want to deal with the nicer things in life as opposed to the darker things.
Well, like I said before, I play war games all the time myself.
Right.
So it's not so much, my moral high horse.
I didn't mean that.
It's the fact that everybody else is doing it so well.
Exactly.
There's no sense for us to compete in that area because there's this big open area that nobody else is competing in.
Right. And
I'd rather go there.
There's a whole passel of headaches
that
you don't have to deal with when you've got controversial issues as the basis.
I don't know about controversy.
We had plenty of controversial issues.
Sims had the first lesbian kiss ever in a video game, I think.
Yeah, in fact, that was when we were, working that out in design. We were worried about that.
But even that's fun, isn't it? Huh? All right, go ahead. You were working that out in the design.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was like a minefield when we were doing the original Sims, with all these kind of ethical issues. Can they hit each other? Can they kiss? Can they have, homosexual relationships, et cetera, et cetera? And we had to kind of thread this path through the minefield very carefully, not only in regards to what our players were expecting, but in regards to our rating. And, there were certain things that we just kind of put down the law and said, okay, we want to, depict gay relationships. We wanted people to put in whatever family they came from, And I was actually very surprised that we didn't get any controversy from that, or very little.
I wonder how many of your players actually build families like they had rather than families that they'd want.
I think they do A, which is what they have, and then they very quickly tear it down and do B.
All right, back to the chat room real quick.
Hold on, still sorting through stuff.
Okay.
It's been just crazy in there since you came in. So
it's interesting that we had some pretty hardcore gamers in the room who didn't know that you were on Xbox. Is this something that's like a hidden feature in your marketing plan?
I don't know. Maybe that implies something about our marketing plan that they don't know.
Yeah.
I think we released it on PS2 first,
yeah,
and then we later did the GameCube and Xbox version, so they came a little bit later, so there's probably more media hype around the PS2 version.
This seems like a franchise that is ripe for exploitation in films, on television, in other media rather than just the gaming community. And with reality television being as popular as it is today with no signs whatsoever of abating, it seems as though a sim of a sim There's something there that are you thinking about doing anything there?
Well, yeah,
Have anybody approached you?
internally, yeah, people have approached us, and we've been thinking about that, and it's stuff that I can't really talk about right now. But one thing that's kind of important to remember is that the key to The Sims is that the players are telling their stories.
Right.
It's not us telling the story to the players. And so as you bring it into a linear property, that's the big challenge you face.
Every time you turn around, though, there's another reason why interactive television is going to be our future.
Right.
And I've talked on the air a million times about the fact that when you watch television, it's a very passive experience.
Right.
People don't really want to choose the ends of their stories.
What really interests me is how do we take something like what's going on with games with custom content creation and user
Right.
communities and mods. How would you bring that into linear entertainment?
Right.
How would you have a television show that incorporated custom content that the players were creating? I mean, so I'm almost more interested in looking at the meta level rather than how do we brand this television show The Sims?
Yeah.
How do we actually take the lessons learned from The Sims and apply it to that media?
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe some of the really cool characters that have been created on The Sims end up being on like The Simpsons. That kind of. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
One more question in the chat room.
And then we're going to have to let him go because I know he's got some
I
other
understand.
appointments. We had one guy wondering about SimCity 4, wondering if there's going to be any more expansions after Rush Hour.
I would say probably so. Almost definitely. I think SimCity, same thing. We're learning what the players want. We listen to their feedback, and then we're learning ways to incrementally add that to the base game.
All right, and it's 11:30 here on the West Coast.
Well, thanks
I know
for having me here.
You got another appointment. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
Will, thank
Enjoy
you.
being here.
Will
Thank
Wright
you very
from
much.
The Sims, and Dave and Sean, and I apologize to the people in the chat room. We tried to squeeze it in, but we thank you very much for stopping by.
Well,
GameSpy
I'll answer
LiveWire.
all the other questions with yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. We'll take a break. We'll come back. Coming up at 1 o'clock this afternoon, actually. Coming up at 1 o'clock, we've got Steve Carell from The Daily Show and from the Ambiguously Gay Duos and from the new Bruce Almighty and so on. What? And and he's coming here to talk about outlaw volleyball. We've got Thresh coming in at 1:30. This is all West Coast timing, talking about Ultimate Arena and the concepts of pro gaming. We've got Morgan coming in from Tech TV, Morgan from Screensavers, Morgan Webb will be in, Tony's coming in from Ubisoft, and then we'll have a wrap-up at the end of the day to talk about everything that all of the editors have seen on the floor here at E3. It is GameSpy LiveWire. I'm David Lawrence with Online Tonight and the Net Music Countdown. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back after lunch here on the West Coast. Stand by, more up next.